Last week was a historic week around here. This congregation voted to move in a radical new direction. Radical. Radical is one of those words that you often hear in liberal religious circles. And it is usually used aspirationally. Radically is frequently paired with the phrase, we want to be. We want to be radically inclusive. Or it is a present tense rendering of a vision or mission, which by their nature are not present realities. It's a mission that you hope to accomplish. So you'll hear, we are radically inclusive. When it's more like we aim to be radically inclusive. And this keeps all that radicalness at a safe distance. Like we say radically, but we mean tomorrow. It's a promise that all too often remains only a promise. It's better than nothing. Radical is an earnest, striving, yearning, hopeful word. At least it is for us in the liberal religious world, but it is also a dangerous word. Dangerous to the guardians of the status quo. And in some ways, we are all guardians of the status quo. The time there was radicals aplenty, right? To hear it told back in the day, in the 60s, radical was practically a vocation. You could be a student radical and then graduate to an anti-war, anti-segregation, anti-nuclear weapon radical. And then, as our Mother Earth began to get sick from all the garbage humans had begun to make, some folks became environmental radicals. So not many, but some, I know some of you may have once been radicals. Now, all of you are radicals. With last week's vote, you all just radicalized yourselves. And I am very excited for us. I'm pretty sure that what we've set out to do has not been done in Unitarian Universalism. If so, it's rare. So what is it that we have done? Well, first of all, we've gone public. Breaking from custom, we've decided to build our future right in the thick of things, not hidden off in some remote sanctuary removed from the eyes of all but those who know where to look. That there is a secret handshake way of doing church. Not welcoming, no matter what they say. Sure, you're welcome if you can find us. And then there's the opposite impulse, the desire to set up shop where people who do not look like most of us live. And this is a well-meaning but unreflective aspiration. What looks to us like a gesture of magnanimity looks to them like another version of colonialism. An arrogant assertion that we know better and they will be better if they knew about us. To be perfectly honest, I believe there's actually some truth to that. I do think that we have a way to be religious that the world needs, a way that has nothing without integrity and a saving message of acceptance and connection. That's a progressive gospel the world needs more of every day. But it needs to be invitational, not colonial. Not colonial, but neither hidden. But you all have threaded the needle. We will remain in our neighborhood, but we will be in a place that is visible, prominently visible, to so many people who do not know what Unitarian Universalism is. We will be visible and newly relevant to some people who do not look like most of you and other people who think quite differently than you do. We will invite the former and win over the latter. And let Northwest Tucson know that there is a place where the spirit of liberal religion, of freedom, integrity, democracy, compassion, acceptance, and curiosity are cultivated and practiced. Being visible to all walks without getting in their way, that's radical. It is exactly what the world needs, and it is exactly what Unitarian Universalist needs. It's what our country needs. It's what we need. We will change lives, and our lives will be changed. All right? Your life will be changed. In this instance, we have the curious distinction of being both the radicals and the guardians of the status quo. And this state of being will have implications. Or if I want to get your attention with some scare tactics, I could say that this move will have consequences. Change is scary. You all have spent a couple years now girding for the weird, and the weird has lived among us and reared its head and spazzed us out, made us touchy and grumpy, as it will do. And though it hasn't always been pleasant, we have come through amazingly well. We have managed even to laugh with it some. We are stronger for it, more aware of what it means to be a covenanted community, more certain of who we are as people and as a people. With last week's vote, I can assure you one thing. The weird, it ain't going away. In some ways, the stakes will be lower. It won't be so material in terms of stakes, but in some ways, the stakes are higher because now they're more about identity. Make no mistake, moving across the street from the Home Depot is a bold and beautiful move, and I am so proud of you. But there are risks. This move, to do it right, you're going to have to reach. Just moving will take work. And you'll do that because you can, and you're good at it. But to do it right, you're going to have to reach. And as I told the kids, reaching doesn't guarantee victory, but not reaching guarantees that not only won't you be the best, you won't be your best. And this is true because even if you don't finish first, even if you are not victorious, whatever that means in this instance, even if you are not victorious, you will learn something deep about yourself by reaching. Always. There is a spiritual dimension to the very act of reaching. And I am not talking about debt. Well, not exactly. We will be going into debt to bring this vision to reality, but there is some wisdom in the notion that at certain times in the life of an organization, debt is a positive indicator. Debt-free living, especially for a church, can also be a good thing, but if it is a perpetual state, it may indicate that the congregation is resting on its laurels, patting itself on the back. And in a tradition that does from time to time trend towards self-satisfaction, debt-free perpetuity can be a seduction into inertia. In some cases, in our case, in this case, debt is a sign of life. It's skin in the game. It is a commitment to a calling. It is a radical maneuver, but as radical as that is, it pales in comparison to the work, the good work, the fun work, the transformative work demanded by our new location. For that work is spiritual in essence as it concerns identity. We need to make space for a diversity, an amount of diversity that we have not seen before. We will need to guard against new guard versus old guard thinking. We need to examine our assumptions about ourselves as individuals and as a congregation and as a faith tradition. And for this congregation, in this tradition, that kind of work is absolutely radical and entirely necessary. And it is necessary and radical whether we make this move or not. But the fact that we have voted to do so says a lot about you. It makes me proud to serve as your minister. I cannot wait until my next district ministry days. This is when ministers gather from all over the Pacific Southwest. I am going to brag and brag. We now have a debt to our future that goes way beyond financial. It is a calling, and while the radical remains, for the moment, aspirational, this one, glory to God, has a deadline. It will not wait. It's not so much we aim to be as we better be, or perhaps we best get going. It's not tomorrow. The time is now. So how do we get going? How do we do that? Well, it's church. So we'll probably start on Sundays. Then from there, we'll move into some educational and reflective programming. Then we'll carry that into justice work and our personal spiritual practices and daily lives, and all of that then will work back into Sunday services, forming a feedback loop that will evolve us onward. So Sundays will change some, and soon. Not a lot. Sort of not a lot. I'd already been wanting to shift us a little bit more out of the form of worship based on the Protestant model, what is often referred to as the hymn sandwich, a model that is clearly in decline across the country, across the world, and apparently insufficient to the future. This shift for us actually will not be radical, but it will be a shift. It has been my intention to craft a more participatory, more embodied, and more sensual practice, to engage more than your hearts and minds, to form some muscle memory in practice so that when the time comes, your response to life's interruptions and eruptions, conditioned by our practice on Sundays, will be automatic and grounded in your chosen faith rather than your evolutionary fear. We will set aside some parts of this liturgy that we have been using for the last couple of years, and we will add other practices. So one of the keys, for example, to non-reactive living is reflection. Not for nothing did we change the name from sermon to reflection. Sermon is top-down. Reflection is invitational. When you are right here with me, we are all reflecting at the same time. So this is not only aspirational in that I want you to be reflecting with me, it's also more accurate in that I know that you already are. In fact, every Sunday somebody comes up to me and says, I like or didn't like how you said X. And I'm like, that didn't happen. So you all are writing this sermon right now with me. You all are filtering these words and reflecting on them in your own particular way. So we are reflecting together. I want to take that one step further. There's a change that's coming, and I want to give you a little heads up about it. So you guys have seen like those little mini composition, like a big composition notebook, and then they've got the little pocket ones. Something like that. Hold something like that in your mind. In the future, you will pick one of those up along with a pen as you come in to practice. And at some point during our practice, I will ask a question. You will have a few minutes to write a response or to draw or react in whatever way you want with that pen and paper. Not whatever way you want. If there's something inappropriate there, you can come to me when you see that. But you write that down, and then at some point you'll turn it back in, and we'll put it in a box, and next week it'll be presented again. Now, your writing will be anonymous. This will not be your journal. As a matter of fact, you'll be able to see everybody else's written responses in there. But in that, you will get this sense of the spiritual life of those sitting near you, right? And it will be anonymous, and I encourage you to be vulnerable, reflective, and honest. And so this is a moment where you will be able to embody a practice of reflection in our practice, all right? So there'll be some other small shifts as well. One not so small shift remains in the exploratory phase at this point, but I wanted to let it out of the bag a little for you. Those of you who attended Cheryl Ponce's memorial know that it was conducted in both English and Spanish. So even as I was composing that service, I felt that somehow this was right. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I felt it very strongly, and so I thought about it some. I asked myself why, and here's what came to me. Doing a bilingual service in a congregation that is by and large not bilingual cannot be in any way a tribute. And it certainly didn't feel like a tribute. And it's not really even only an invitation. What it felt like, especially as I projected forward, was that it felt like a holding of space. And until it is a service to those who feel invited by it, that is to say, Spanish speakers, it is a reminder of where we are and who isn't there. So, if I could figure out the logistics of that, we may move to doing bilingual practices once a month or once a quarter or something like that. And this, too, is practice for preparing for a radical future. Also, Kimberly and I are finding ways to get more music into service and more of you into music. And new music, different music. Over the summer, I instructed our music team that we should have no music in church other than some hymns that was written by white men from the year 1500 to 1960. I've backed off of that somewhat. There's so much music out there that we as a tradition need to find our way to learn from and celebrate. And we will. Additionally, Kim has agreed to educate us a little whenever we are about to sing a song that has been borrowed from other traditions or cultures, so that we know on whose ground we tread. Kimberly is also putting together what I'm calling, for the moment, a missionary choir. I call it missionary because we haven't come up with a name and because it will be focused on performing just one song, and then it will dissipate. So it's like a mission. You come together, you do the song, and then that's it. So let's say you really want to be part of the regular choir, but you just can't commit to a rehearsal schedule for 9 months. Well, let Kimberly know that you want to sing, and then later she selects a song and might recruit you to that song. And by and large, these won't be traditional choral numbers either. One of the first ones on the docket, I think, is by the Village People. Is that right? Yeah. The Village People from 14th century England. The village, something on Kent. Of course, the traditional choir will still be operational and doing some really moving pieces this year. And yes, of course, you can do both. So that's Sundays. Now we're going to have to do some work during the week as well. It can't just be on Sundays. You'll want to participate in the offerings that we have during the week. You might want to lead some offerings that we have during the week. We really need to reflect on learning about where white supremacy culture has shaped our nation and our tradition, our congregation and ourselves, and how to dismantle it in our culture and in our bodies. Now, in saying that, I don't want you to feel judged. Challenged? Maybe. Curious? Essentially. So these adult religious education classes are offering you another opportunity to become free, to identify and shed the systems of and psychologies that make of you an unwitting oppressor, and to work for the freedom of others at the same time. So we will explore in these classes whether or not the subtle and not so subtle manifestations of racism can be seen through the lens of addiction. We will explore applying the 12 steps to that addiction. I also hope to explore what the consequences of centering whiteness, maleness, and straightness are, or perhaps what unintentional centering of any kind does and what to do about it. How do we move out of a domination paradigm and into a cooperation paradigm? And I invite you, any of you, to approach me with some ideas of your own that lead us into the future. Do you want to teach a class or a workshop or put together a lecture series? Email me. It is not necessary that every idea is about identity and justice, but it would be great if you could tie us into that in some way or another. For that's the work that lies ahead, by and large. We have got a year ahead of us. It will not be a perfect year. It will be messy. I will make mistakes. You, or at least the person next to you, will make mistakes. But if we don't, how will we ever practice being happy? Because, and this is something that I learned this past week, it's from the girls. Girls started taking Kung Fu last week. And their Kung Fu teacher said, and I believe this, the key to happiness is forgiveness. Freedom. I'm saying happiness. Freedom and happiness. You can't have one without the other. forgiveness. So we have a year of forgiveness ahead of us. Hallelujah. We no longer have the lazy luxury of hypocrisy. The radical is no longer in the future, nor the past. Though it remains aspirational, it is immediate now. It is you. The radical is you. It is time to reach. The promise is now. The promise is you, right now. Today, you look in that mirror in your mind. You are the promise. Reach for it. Please rise, congregation, and body or spirit, and join each other in singing hymn number 359, When We Are Gathered. Change, there's a word in there. It's worship. Change it to practice.